Welcome class to AJ 750. Let's start our course with an overview of the material to be covered in the upcoming 16 weeks. But before I start, let me provide some general housekeeping information. First, this class is taught entirely online and does not require you to be on campus. Second, all assignments will be submitted online. Weekly lectures and assignments are viewable in the modules section, which can be found on the course menu left side of your screen. You will begin with week 1. Modules open every Monday at 7 a.m. and close on Sunday of the same week at 11:59 p.m. If your work is not completed by the closing date, you may submit work up to 1 week late and receive half credit. After that, you receive no points. The course menu is where you will find links to other areas needed to complete weekly assignments, use course email, and complete weekly student discussions. Now, some audio links do not work with either Internet Explorer or Safari. I recommend therefore you use Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox as your default browser. But if not possible, you can always read the text I provide wherever there is an audio file that says click to listen. Use the course PM email system, that's private messages, if you need to reach me. I read messages several times daily. If your need is an emergency, be sure to type 911 in the subject line. Now, you can learn more about the course by going to week 1 and click Start Here when you are done with this introduction. So let's get started with why study ethics and would you murder one person to save 5. This course is about the ethical and moral decisions made by all criminal justice professionals every day, 24/7. Let's say you were a police officer. How then would you go about deciding what is the right thing to do? Learning how to determine the right thing to do is the central purpose of this course. All of us make ethical decisions each day, whether we recognize them or not. Think about some ethical choices you've been faced with in the last couple of weeks or maybe months. Perhaps you've been faced with one of the following ethical choices. At work, you were asked to cover for a friend who wanted to go home early and not report time lost. Or a coworker took something from the store where you both worked and expected you to say nothing. A friend asked you to lie to cover up the fact that they cheated and went out on their boyfriend or girlfriend and with another person. Or perhaps you felt compelled to tell a professor a white lie when asking for an extension on an assignment or for a different test time. All of us make choices that can be judged under ethical standards. Further, we frequently judge other people's behaviors as right or wrong. Criminal justice professionals, whether they work in law enforcement, the courts, or corrections, encounter a multitude of situations in which they must make choices that can be judged after the fact as either right or wrong. A characteristic of every criminal justice profession is that the role entails a public trust that involves power over others. Those who have such power must be especially sensitive to the ethical issues that may arise in their professional lives. The criminal justice system often is examined using political, organizational, or sociological approaches. Let us shift from the lens somewhat and look at the system through the ethical perspective. Asking whether something is legal, for instance, is not necessarily the same question as asking whether something is right. Actors at every stage in the justice process make decisions that can be analyzed and judged as ethical or unethical. Although the decisions faced by these professionals, ranging from legislators who write the laws to correctional professionals who then supervise prisoners, may be different. They also have similarities, especially in the use of discretion and the presence of authority and power. Legislators have the power to define behavior as legal and therefore punishable. They also have the power to set the amount of punishment. They criminalize behavior usually because it threatens public safety, but sometimes also employ moral definitions for deciding which behaviors should be legal and which should be illegal. Protection of public morality is the rationale for a number of laws, including those involving drugs, gambling, and prostitution. How do legislators use this great discretion to balance the rights of all people? Further, how do criminal justice leaders guide their subordinates in implementing the laws in a fair and just manner? Chapters 4 and 5 explore these questions in more detail. Now, police officers who enforce the laws created by legislators have a great deal of discretion and power. For instance, they have 1. The power to deprive people of their liberty through arrest. 2. The power to decide which individuals to investigate and perhaps target for undercover operations. And 3. The power to issue tickets and or provide mercy and let a driver off with a warning. Police serve as the interface between the awesome power of the state and the citizenry governed. In some countries, police operate as a fearsome, coercive force for controlling political bodies. In the United States, a small number of people believe that our police operate in a similar way. However, we enjoy constitutional protections against the untrampled police power, and police act as the guardians of the law, not merely enforcers for those in power. In chapters 7, 8, and 9, the ethical use of police discretion is discussed in more detail. Let's turn to prosecutors. Prosecutors probably face the least public scrutiny of all criminal justice professionals, which is ironic because they possess a great deal of discretion in deciding who and how to prosecute. For instance, they decide which charges to pursue and which to drop. They decide which cases to take to a grand jury, and they decide how to prosecute a case and whether to pursue the death penalty in homicide cases. They make decisions about the types of crimes to pursue and which affect police officers and enforcement decisions. Although prosecutors have ethical duties to pursue justice rather than conviction, some critics argue that at times their decisions making seems to be influenced by politics or factors other than the goal of justice. Now, judges also possess incredible power, typically employed through decision making in the following areas. First, by denying or accepting plea bargains, or decisions regarding rules of evidence, or decisions about sentencing. Chapters 10 and 11 explore the ethical issues of legal professions in the criminal justice system. And finally, correctional officers have the following immense powers over the lives of some citizens. For instance, probation officers make recommendations in pre-sentence reports and violations of these reports that affect whether an individual goes to prison. And prison officials decide to award or take away good time and may decide to punish an inmate with segregation. Both types of decisions affect the individual's liberty. Correctional officers make daily decisions that affect the life and health of the prisoners they supervise. Parole officers decide when to file a violation report, as well as make less serious decisions regarding the parolee's life. In short, all correctional professionals have a great deal of discretion over the lives of those they control. The ethical issues of correctional professionals are discussed in chapters 12, 13, and 14. Although the professionals discussed face different dilemmas, they all have the following common elements. First, they each have discretion, that is, the power to make a decision. Although the specific decisions are different, they all involve power over others and the potential deprivation of life, liberty, or property. They each have the duty of enforcing the law. Although this concept is obvious with police, it is also clear that each of the professionals mentioned has a basic duty to uphold and enforce all laws. They serve the law and in their professional lives. They must accept that their duty is to protect the constitutional safeguards that are the cornerstones of our legal system, specifically due process and equal protection. Due process protects each of us from error in any governmental deprivation of life, liberty, or property. We recognize the right of government to control and even to punish us, but we have certain protections against arbitrary or unlawful use of that power. Due process protects against such abuses. We also expect that the power of our government will be used fairly and in an unbiased manner. Equal protection should ensure that what happens to us is not determined by the color of our skin, our gender, nationality, or the religion we practice. Laws are for everyone, and the protection of the law extends to all of us. Although a fair amount of evidence indicates that different treatment does exist, the ideal of equal protection is an essential element of our legal system and should be an operating principle for every worker in the criminal justice system. For they are all public servants. Their salaries come from the public purse. Public servants possess more than a job. They have taken on special duties involving the public trust. Individuals such as legislators, public officials, police officers, judges, and prosecutors are either elected or appointed guardians of the public interest. Arguably, they must be held to a higher standard than those they guard or govern. Temptations are many, and unfortunately we find examples of double standards in which public servants take advantage of their position for special favors rather than the higher standard of exemplary behavior. Obviously, the law governs many of the decisions that public servants make, but because of the discretion at every step of the criminal justice process, the possibility of an unethical use of such discretion remains. Understanding ethical issues involved in one's profession might help to guide such discretion and prevent abuse. Therefore, all professionals in the criminal justice field must be sensitive to ethical issues. These issues may involve their relationships with citizens and others over whom they have power, their relationship with their agency, or the relationship with one another. Thank you for listening, and please continue with your assignments.